Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we are continuing our series of studies in the book of Ruth. We're in chapter 2, and we'll be looking at verse 1 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we see here in verse 1 of chapter 2, it says, And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Now, so it says here, Naomi had a kinsman. Now, kinsman, the Hebrew word for kinsman is goel, G-O-E-L, goel. And goel means a friend. It means a familiar friend. It can also mean an acquaintance. Now, but in this context of Ruth, it has more of a meaning of a close relative. Now, being a goel meant that you were the nearest living male relative to someone. And it's important that the goel had to be a male, all right? And this meant that there were certain duties attached to being the goel. A goel is one who rescues or helps their relative, and that's important. A goel is one who rescues or helps their relative, and you'll see it here in a few verses here. One duty of the goel is to be the avenger of the blood. So there were two main duties of the goel. The first one was to be the avenger of the blood. If a murder was committed in his family, then it was his duty to seek out the murderer and to avenge his relative's murder. And he would have to try to catch the murderer before that murder escaped to one of the cities of refuge. So remember, in the land of Israel, after the tribes were set up, there were 6 cities of refuge. There were 3 on the east side of the Jordan and 3 on the west side. And if a person committed a murder, or if a person was, in a sense, how can I say, accused of a murder, something happened, and a person died, and he was afraid, the person that was considered the murderer was afraid that they were going to be accused for this person's death, they would immediately have to run as fast as they can, run or horse or donkey, whatever, to one of these cities of refuge. And then a trial would be made, or they would stay there until the high priest died. And they would have to stay in that city for as long as the law told them that they could stay there. But they were safe as long as they were inside that city of refuge. Now, the second main duty of the goel was to be a redeemer. Now, in Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 25, they could redeem land that was sold. So if you were a goel and you had a relative, a cousin, brother, sister, and they were poor and they had to sell their land in order to have money, you, as the goel, if you had money, you could go and buy back that land from whoever they sold it to. In Leviticus 25 and verse 47, they could be a redeemer to a relative that sold themselves because they were poor. And that happened that happened, I don't want to say very commonly, but it did happen in the land of Israel, where a person would become poor and they would become a slave and sell themselves to someone who was rich and had money. And so they would go and they would become this rich person's slave. And you, as the Goel, again, if you had the money, you could go and buy back your relative from whoever they sold themselves to. Now, there were 4 requirements of the kinsman redeemer, of the Goel. And we are going to give, for each of these requirements, we are also going to give how Jesus Christ fulfilled these requirements. Now, the first requirement was that first you must be a kinsman, meaning you have to be related to the person who you're redeeming. And Jesus Christ fulfilled that in his incarnation. Okay? Jesus Christ took upon himself a human body, so he became one of us. God in heaven, in Philippians chapter 2, verses 6, 7, and 8, he took upon himself, he was clothed with the human body. All right? Secondly, he must be able to redeem. So, meaning he has to have the money in order to redeem. So the first requirement is, first, you must be a kinsman redeemer. You must be related to the one you're redeeming. Secondly, you have to have the means to redeem. You have to have the money. Now, Jesus Christ had the money. He paid for us with his blood. His blood was the payment to God for our sins, for our souls. All right? The third requirement was the one redeeming could not be in bondage himself. And we see that Jesus Christ, he was free from the old sin nature. We, as it says in Romans 6, we are all slaves to sin. We're a slave. So we need redeeming. Well, Jesus Christ came, he took upon himself a human body, but he did not have an old sin nature. Jesus Christ did not have a sin nature imputed to that physical body. Therefore, he was free from being in bondage to sin. So that's the third requirement. The fourth and the final requirement is the kinsman redeemer had to be willing to redeem. He would want to do it. And Jesus Christ willingly laid down his life for us. He did it willingly. And he gave his life for what in John says, no greater love hath a man than that he laid down his life for his friends. And Jesus Christ willingly came from heaven, was clothed with humanity, and he was not sinful like we are. There was no sin nature in him at all. He was free from that bondage of sin. And therefore, he willingly laid down his life and shed his blood and paid the payment for our sins. So Jesus Christ is our kinsman redeemer. So now we get into, and it says here, verse 1, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth. So he definitely had the money to do it, to redeem them, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Now, we're going to finish this lesson with Boaz. It's not certain what his name means, but most scholars believe that his name means in him is strength, or strength is in him. So here's Boaz. He's related to Naomi. He definitely has the money to redeem. And now we enter into this kinsman redeemer here. And now the genealogy of Boaz is very interesting. In fact, I would more than likely say that most of you do not understand, you don't know about Boaz. You've probably read it in the Bible, but you've kind of just glossed over it and kept reading and didn't really think about it and meditate upon Boaz's genealogy. It's very, very, very beautiful here. His grandfather's name was Nahshon. He was of the tribe of Judah. And we see that in Numbers chapter 1. Numbers chapter 1. We're going to read verses 1 through 7. Please, please forgive me as I get to these names, trying to pronounce some of these names here. But it says here in Numbers chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation, on the first day of the second month, in the second year, after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel, after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. From 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies. And with you there shall be a man of every tribe, every one head of the house of the father." So he's saying here that every tribe needs to have a head, the head of each tribe. So, verse 5, "And these are the names of the men that shall stand with you." So these are the names of the men who are the head of their tribe. So it says here, of the tribe of Reuben, Elizur, the son of Shedur; of Simeon, Shelumai, the son of Zurid Shaddai; and of Judah, verse 7, of Judah, Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. All right. So, verse 7, of Judah. So Nahshon was the head of the tribe of Judah. Now, his father's name, Boaz's father's name, was Salmon. We see that in Ruth chapter 4. Ruth chapter 4 and verses 20 and 21. And it says, "And Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon." Remember, Nahshon, he was the head of the tribe of Judah, right? And he begat Salmon, his son. And verse 21, "And Salmon begat Boaz." So we see this in that Boaz was Salmon's son. And then in 1 Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 11, it says, "And Nahshon begat Salma, and Salma begat Boaz." So his grandfather was Nahshon. His father's name was Salmon. And we see now, but the very most interesting part of Boaz's genealogy is seen in Matthew chapter 1. And we look at verses 4 and 5, and it says, "And Salmon," verse 4 says, "And Aram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahshon." Remember, Nahshon, the father of the tribe of Judah, begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon, right? Boaz's father. Verse 5, "And Salmon begat Boaz," his son, right? Boaz. Of who? Of who? Who is his mother? Who's his mother? Rahab. "And Boaz begat Obed, and Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse." So we see in one verse in one verse we see Boaz's mother was Rahab, right? And Obed and Boaz marries Ruth. Now, so Salmon's wife was Rahab the harlot from Jericho, and she was a Canaanite. So here we have it's very, because a lot of times we read these verses and we don't kind of meditate, we kind of go over them. But now that we're studying the book of Ruth and we're seeing the beauty in Ruth and the grace of God and the mercy of God and the forgiveness of God, and how God sometimes God doesn't think the way we think. God doesn't many times do things the way we do things. And he plans things out differently. And here Boaz's mother was Rahab the harlot. And so it's possible that Boaz, knowing who his mother was, not only knowing who his mother was, but knowing what his mother was, therefore, he was not afraid to identify himself with Ruth. She was a Gentile from Moab. Well, Boaz is also a Gentile. He's part Gentile. Ruth, she's full Gentile. But Boaz, in a sense, he's kind of got two strikes against him. Not only is he part Gentile, but he's the son of a harlot. Boaz had Gentile blood in him also. But the integrity with which Boaz lived his life and the way that he honored God and treated his people seems to imply that Boaz did not allow his Gentile heritage, nor the possible ridicule of what his mother was, to affect his relationship with God or the Jewish faith. It seems that Boaz was a very honorable man. And none of it, and his mother being a Canaanite and being a harlot had seemed to have no effect on the integrity with which Boaz lived his life, and how he followed God and honored God in his life. And it seems that Boaz was also held to some degree in honor before the people around him. The nearest kinsman in Ruth chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, the nearest kinsman who represents the law may not have had Gentile blood in him, and therefore did not want to be defiled by Ruth, the Gentile Moabitess. Remember, in this story of Ruth, we understand the types, that Boaz is a type of Christ. He's the kinsman. Ruth is a type of the church of Christ, the Gentiles who come into a relationship with God and are able to have access to God and imputed righteousness to them. But the nearer kinsman is the law of Moses. He's the law of Moses, and the nearer kinsman doesn't want to be defiled, as the law condemns anyone who is not holy and righteous like God is. So also the nearer kinsman doesn't want to touch Ruth the Moabitess, doesn't want to be defiled by her. The pure, holy law can only condemn sin. But Boaz, or Jesus Christ, he identified with our sin, becoming a human and taking our sins, and was willing and able to redeem us. So as Boaz was willing, and he definitely was able to redeem, so also Jesus Christ, he's our kinsman redeemer. He became one of us. and he was willing, and he shed his blood and paid for ours. That's a beautiful, beautiful message. And it just brings out so much more of the beauty of God, the beauty of God's righteousness, that it was Boaz, the son of a Canaanite, but the son of a harlot, who had Gentile blood in him, but he was an honorable man. He was a man that loved God and knew what the law was. And he pursued to redeem Ruth and Naomi. All right, until next lesson, God bless you. Walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.